What do you think?
I think we're dead meat. Real dead meat.
You're dead meat! Go ahead and laugh, you guys. If I ever find a little bastards that did this, they're dead meat.
Hey, welcome to the Dead Meat Podcast, an extension of the YouTube channel Dead Meat. I'm James.
I'm Chelsea, and we're boyfriend and girlfriend, and we like to get scared together, and we're back after a week off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we got a friend.
Yeah, I'm a third wheel, I guess.
we found you in our week off. We wandered the land and
We
found you.
Yep.
Yeah, my name is Joey Clift. Wait, is this where I introduce myself?
Yeah.
Yeah,
great.
do
All right, cool.
it.
Yeah. All right, my name is Joey Clift. I'm a comedy writer based out of Los Angeles, written for shows on Cartoon Network, DreamWorks, and a bunch of other places. I'm an enrolled member of the Cowlitz Indian tribe, guys.
Yeah.
Which I think is the reason that you have me out here today.
Well, part of the reason. We also just like you.
Yeah, we
thank
like
you.
Yeah, patrons may know Joey's voice because you did a commentary track with us
Yeah, it was
a while ago.
Zombievers, right?
It was Zombievers, which was surprisingly fun.
Yeah, it was a very self-aware horror. Like it knew that it was a bad horror movie and it had fun with it.
It was a lot of fun, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're a patron, check that out. And if you're not, maybe sign up and you can check that out.
Yeah, it was, guys, I made some real funny jokes. You should listen to those jokes.
He's real funny.
Yeah.
You'll get a little preview of it today.
Yeah. Joey also runs the best group on Facebook.
Oh, yeah. I run the LA Underground Cat Network.
That's
it's
right.
a Facebook group by and for comedians to share pictures of their cats. It has, I think, 8,500 members.
Yeah. It's the most sincere Facebook group, and it's
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, you guys posting it all the time. It's great.
Yeah, there's lots of Lucy pictures.
Oh,
Yeah. So, that's the thing I'm going to promote. So if you've got a cat and you have Facebook, you should join the LA Underground Cat Network and post pictures of your cats. It'll be fun.
Yes. Well, today we're going to talk about, and I'm excited to do this topic. We had some requests for this, actually. We're going to talk about Native representation in horror, and I specifically took a lot of notes about the Indian burial ground trope, but we might make this a little freeform because I want to just see where the conversation goes because I know you're going to have a lot of really interesting things to say,
have
especially
so
with the
many
movies.
opinions.
Especially with the movies we kind of picked to focus on specifically. We got Amityville, the original, and the book kind of we'll talk a little bit about. You didn't have to read the book.
Oh, good. Oh, God.
Oh, shit, I didn't do that homework.
Yeah. Oh, geez. I got to fake reading this book. My favorite part was page 10.
Yeah, it's good. Pet Cemetery and The Shining.
Now, you've done a lot of research for this, Chelsea, as always. And Joey, I feel like you're coming pretty prepared to this.
Oh, yeah, I'm hot.
Yeah, I'm just along for the ride here. I haven't had any time to do any research.
You got your Jack Torrance
So
shirt on.
you just turn your microphone off.
All right.
Let's maybe like go into the history of the trope a little bit, and then maybe after that we can kind of like weave into the movies because I feel like there's like I want to talk about the movies just as movies because some of them are not good.
Yeah, no, we
No.
can definitely make space for us to just riff on these.
How fucking boring Amityville is.
Yeah, Amityville.
This-
Holy shit.
The scariest part about Amityville Horror was when they revealed that the house that they bought only cost $80,000.
We immediately got out the inflation calculator website, and it came out to be, I think, in today's dollars, like 200-some thousand.
That's still very
That's so
cheap
Yeah.
cheap
for a 3-story, like 5-bedroom house.
Yeah.
with
Even a murder
ghosts?
house
Yeah.
is cheap.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even for a murder house, that's like
It's
very
really cheap.
In like a nice neighborhood, it's got like a boat dock.
Yeah, Long
and like a
Island.
separate shed that he's like, oh, I'll make that my office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay.
$80,000? Might as well be $800,000.
We'll talk a little bit about the concept of Indian burial grounds first, which surely, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably pretty familiar with the concept of it because it's so ingrained in horror. Like, that's such a trope that was born from horror movies, specifically American horror movies. And apparently, film theorists and people who like study tropes and stuff call it the IBG.
Oh, I didn't know it had a shorthand.
It said so much that
Yeah.
they were like, oh, we got to save time by making a shorthand
It
version
is
of
a
this.
mouthful.
Yeah.
So I'm going to use that because I like it.
IBG.
IBG.
Okay.
It sounds like, out loud saying it sounds like a digestive.
Yeah, it definitely
Exactly.
sounds like
Yeah.
IBS.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I got a case of the IBG.
Yeah,
Sorry,
we're
guys.
filming this the day after Thanksgiving. My IBG's kicking in.
Yeah.
Oh,
Just really
man.
having an IBG flare up right now.
So yeah, so it's important to I just want to say upfront.
That's what happens at Pet Cemetery.
Yeah, it's an IVG
Yeah,
flare-up.
a guy has an IVG flare up, and it's disgusting.
So yeah, we're gonna talk about these specifically 3 movies. Maybe some other ones will come up, but we're gonna be critiquing them, maybe pointing out some things about them that are not quite they're problematic, but that doesn't mean we can't like them. They're
'cause The
movies we
Shining's
like
still
because of
fucking dope.
Amityville. Yeah, The Shining is one of our favorites.
Yeah.
Every podcast, not this one because the setup's different, but we have the 4th of July ball picture
Oh yeah.
up on the wall. That's always in the background. James has a Jack Torrance shirt.
Wait, where's the 4th? Oh, great.
Yeah.
Did you guys Photoshop yourselves into the picture?
No,
we should.
We actually every year we always have a New Year's thing, and I'm always like, I want to recreate that picture, and I have everyone do the exact poses of.
Oh,
Yeah.
we've gotten
It
pretty
would be,
close.
We've gotten
last
close, but
year.
it is like herding cats. It's difficult when everyone's
Especially,
drunk.
Yeah, pretty drunk.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys should just throw a Shining party and invite all your podcast listeners to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
They'll cooperate when I want to take the group photo.
Can I wear the bear costume?
Actually, okay, so question about The Shining. What is the deal with the bear costume guy?
It's such.
from the book, but even in the book, it's not
Is
really
it
that
from the
explained.
book?
Yeah, it's in the book.
Really?
The guy who runs or owns the hotel has like a little sex slave
Ullman?
dude walking around with him who's in a bear costume.
Oh,
Weird.
okay.
So yeah, it sheds a little bit more light on it, but
Does it?
a little bit.
Like in the movie, it just reads as like, oh, more creepy stuff. Got it.
Yeah,
Got
exactly.
it. All right,
Yeah.
cool. Because that's the part of the movie where everything is just haywire. And
Yeah.
then, fuck it. We'll just show
Yeah.
this. Yeah. I think when they play The Shining on TV, that's like the only thing that's different. Is you don't have that shot, and everything else is basically the same.
Well, one of my favorite Shining stories is that like originally when making the trailer, or like wasn't it when making the movie, the studio refused to let the bloody elevator shot be in the movie because they were like, oh, that's too gory to have an elevator filled with blood, spill blood all over this hallway. And Stanley Kubrick said, like, it's not blood, it's dirty water.
What? I've
Really?
never heard that,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that sounds.
Did it work?
It's yeah, it worked. That's why it's in the
Yeah.
movie. Stanley Kubrick lied and said like that's just it's just a pipe, like a rusty pipe burst.
Well, if you subscribe to some of The Shining has a intense base of film theorists
Yeah.
who obsess over this movie. And if you haven't seen the documentary Room 237, I don't know if I recommend. It's not one that I can easily recommend because it's so dense, and a lot of it is just.
It's a drag.
It's a little bit of a slog, but there is some really interesting insight into this movie. And one take on it that I really like is specifically Bill Blakemore's take. He's a journalist, and he's in Room 237, but he's done a bunch of analyses of this movie, and he believes that The Shining is about America trying to forget its past genocide of Native Americans. And he gets all this from a almost throwaway line in the movie where they talk so briefly. It's near the beginning.
When was the Overlook built?
Construction started in 1907. It was finished in 1909. The site is supposed to be located on an Indian burial ground, and I believe they actually had to repel a few Indian attacks as they were building it.
He thinks that the blood elevator, because an elevator essentially, if it's built on top of that kind of ground, just becomes a well.
So presumably, we can imagine the elevator shafts sink down into the very bodies of the Indians, so to speak, and that's where the blood is coming from.
I read about that theory, and where that theory kind of rubs me the wrong way a little bit. I buy it as a theory, and I buy that being Stanley Kubrick's intent.
Mm-hmm.
But the concept of making a movie, when did The Shining come out? 1970?
80,
1980.
yeah.
Yep.
So the concept of making a movie in 1980 about America trying to get over the genocidal past of natives is that shit was still going on around then.
Mm-hmm.
So it's native civil rights didn't happen until the late 60s. So this is 10 years after native civil rights. This was 1980. This is a year or two after natives in Washington were getting dragged out of boats and by the cops and beaten for fishing on their Aboriginal lands. Do you guys know about native boarding schools at all?
No.
All right, so like native boarding school. Oh god. Oh man, we're
No,
digging
go,
in.
go, go.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
this is the
All right,
this
so
is the
it's got to get way less
history.
fun.
No, do it. Do
So
it.
boarding schools. So the U.S. government, in one of the things that they did to, I guess, destroy native culture and try to eradicate native culture, is they built what are called boarding schools. They started building them in like late 1800s, early 1900s. Specifically, a school called the Carlisle School was the first one, and the point of the school was basically to like kidnap native children and bring them to these schools and force them to learn English, and then like beat and abuse them if they spoke their native language or like did any of their like native customs from their tribes or anything like that. Literally, this was a government-funded school, and the tagline for the school was "Kill the Indian, save the man."
Oh my
So
god!
that's like a government school,
right.
and like so, The Shining took place in 1980. The last native boarding school in the U.S. closed in like the mid 90s.
Holy shit! Really?
Like there's like First Nations, First Nations is what Canadian Aboriginal people are called. I think the First Nations boarding school closed like this decade or like last decade.
The Canadian government created and helped run the residential school system, which was meant to kill the Indian in the child. After being forced to leave their families, many children suffered horrific abuses, such as rape, torture, and even death.
There's still stuff going on like right now. A big thing in Native country is just like hundreds of Indigenous women just go missing every year. Like that's something that happens right now. This year, like literally like today, like I read this article 3 hours ago. The Canadian government is in trouble because doctors in Canada have been forced sterilizing Native women or coercing them to be sterilized. It's the sort of thing, like I've read stuff on Twitter about this, about like a woman will, like a Native woman, First Nations woman will give birth, and the doctor will say, we're not going to give you your kid unless you let us sterilize you. And like that's something that like the Canadian government is dealing with right now. So like just the idea of making a movie in 1980 that's like we're trying to get over this stuff, it's like insulting as a Native person.
Sure. And I think compounding that too is when you look at the presence of natives in horror, they're often like an unseen monster.
Yeah.
Where it's an unseen force that exists to make the white characters feel bad.
There was a tribe of Indians called the Shinnecogs, and they used this land as a sort of exposure pen. They put all the crazy people here, and they left them here to die. There are people buried here.
You're like creating like a both seen and invisible villain in Natives, which is it's like lame because like they didn't do like a ton of research on it. Like Amityville Horror, the tribe that like actually
the Shinnecock tribe where they didn't even live.
Yeah, they lived within like they lived 50 miles away. There was like no like human remains on that site. Also, like I'm not even sure if that tribe didn't have burial grounds. So it's like they clearly didn't consult with a Native person in writing this movie. So no Native writer or producer got a credit or any work out of this. If you're a part of that tribe, you're probably upset because they just got all the details wrong on your tribe. Like they clearly just like didn't care to check into it. And then it's also disappointing because like there are a lot of really talented Native actors that aren't getting work. So it's like, I guess that it would be an easier pill to swallow if they like hired a bunch of Natives for those roles. But like instead, it's just kind of a throwaway line of like, oh, it's some Native bullshit caused these ghosts.
Yeah, it definitely feels like Native is just used as like a shorthand for like mystical.
Yeah, and like that sucks too, because like I mean I don't know, guys. I wish I had magic powers, but I don't have magic powers. It's like something that I run into a lot is like just because people aren't educated about like Native issues, I think that it's like a huge blind spot for people. I get asked like the dumbest, me and my Native friends get asked the dumbest questions about like being Native. So people will ask me like if I had electricity growing up, because I grew up on a reservation. Like my friend Lucas has been asked by grown adults, Lucas Brown Eyes, very funny Native writer, if he has magic powers.
No.
Like by adults that should know better. And he says, yes, he has shapeshifter magic, but don't tell anybody. But yeah, it's like there's this like ignorance to Native culture and Native issues that I think is propagated by things like the IBS. IBG. Propagated by IBS, by irritable bowel syndrome. But it's like propagated by Indian burial grounds and movies. It's just like stuff gets waved away as native bullshit or like mystical native bullshit.
Or like any land that natives lived on is now magical because reasons.
And it's like that's for a lot of people, that's the only native representation that they get is just the idea of one, natives are all dead, and two, they're all haunting these houses. People just assume that we don't exist. And it's things like the Indian burial ground make us seem
like of the past.
It makes us seem of the past or worse, fictional. So like people look at us like we're like wood nymphs or elves.
You know what? This has nothing to do with horror. I'm curious, how do you feel about like King of the Hill?
Oh shit!
King of the Hill, John Redcorn. Big ups to John Redcorn. That character rules.
Is he like one of the most like likable people in the show?
So I guess that like what I like about that character, there are some stereotypical things going on in that, like, you know, sometimes when he talks, flute music plays and stuff like that, and that's like a thing that's like, hey, wait a second, flute music doesn't play well when I talk. Why not? But he's such a three-dimensional character, and also he's played as a character that is aware of his bullshit. Like, he knows that he's faking it sometimes. And there are also characters that look at him like he's like a mystical creature, and he'll just straight man it and like drive away in his El Camino or whatever. You know, like, I think that John Redcorn is a very, I don't know if the voice actor playing John Redcorn is a native dude, so I can't necessarily speak on like, oh, then it also had this great, you know, native representation in that. But I think that as a character, I really appreciated what he was and how he was
like a real person,
and a character of this generation. I don't think ever wore a loincloth on the show unless it was like for a bit. Like,
hey, do your people even celebrate Thanksgiving?
We did once.
You know, he was a character of this century and not 1705 or whatever. You know?
And that kind of stuff is where people who the last question's like, oh, did you have electricity growing up? That's where people get those ideas.
And these aren't like kids asking me this question. These are like people in their like late 30s and early 40s who like went to college and live in Los Angeles. So it's like you should know better.
Really quick, I'll get back on track after this. There's a great YouTube series called Ask a Slave. It's by a woman who worked as a living history kind of actor at the Washington estate. So she was playing one of Martha Washington's slaves. And this YouTube series is her it's people reenacting just questions that she would get asked while she was working. And it is incredible. It's really funny.
You know, Red Jacket, that's a mighty fine piece of silver you got there.
Yes, thank you. I received this when negotiating peace with the Americans after the war. They got our land, and I got this metal.
And is that you on it?
Yes, it is me sharing the pipe of peace with your master George Washington, or as we call him, Hanadagayas.
Ooh, that sounds regal. What does it mean?
Town destroyer.
The thing about IBGs too is there is no, like, the concept of there just being an overarching kind of burial ground. I was reading I think it was a column by Terri Jean, who is a native author, and she was saying that just like that concept in general is weird. Like, there is no, it's like having an overarching like African burial ground, or like it's so broad that it doesn't make any sense.
Like, I wrote a sketch recently. It was like a commercial PSA that was just like, are you trying to find cheap land to buy a haunted house, but all the Indian burial grounds are taken? Have you thought of using a European burial ground,
also known as a cemetery?
Well, and also like not just, I mean, like that. It is weird that the concept of like, other people have burial grounds.
Everyone
like our ghosts aren't extra spooky just because we're native.
Yeah, that was something she pointed out, is like there's nothing specifically quote unquote Indian about a graveyard or a haunted graveyard. Like, every culture ever is afraid of mistreating the dead. Like, that's something that just freaks us out as humans.
but like in addition to that, there are 562 federally recognized tribes, more on the state level and more than that aren't federally recognized, that all have their own cultures, norms, and like languages and things like that. So the idea of just like Indian burial ground, it's like that's not a thing. There's like a Cowlitz burial ground. There's a lot of tribes, like you said, don't have burial grounds. All of these tribes have different cultures as far as like how they handle the dead. So the idea of like just an Indian burial ground as a catch-all is like, it's like saying European burial ground, where it's like, no, there's not. That's not a thing.
That's not a thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
This was their burial ground.
Whose burial ground?
Micmac Indians.
Does Pet Cemetery get any points for using? Because I forget what the name of the tribe is.
He uses the Micmac tribe, which didn't even. That was not in the area.
Yeah. So like, okay, so he gets points for using the tribe's name, but he loses points because the Micmac tribe is like Canadian and this is Maine.
Hey, Maine's basically our Canada.
Yeah, but like, were there Micmac people in? I don't know. Like somebody listening might know this. I don't think that there were Micmac people in Maine.
I don't believe there were when I was looking up stuff about Pet Cemetery. Although interestingly, while he was writing it, Maine was in a giant legal battle with the Maliseet, Penobscot, and Passamaquoddy tribes. Of the Wabanaki Confederacy. And yeah, the Micmac tribe was not.
Yeah, they weren't part of that.
Yeah.
It's like, why do you use the Micmac tribe?
Yeah.
Why didn't you use one of the actual tribes?
It's like, did you just like the name more? Did you like the way it sounded more?
Yeah. Well, that's another thing is like people will like, I feel like people will take carte blanche with like native culture and like native things, and they'll change things just because they think it sounds better. Like it's like a non-native writer when writing a script or putting together a marketing campaign will like change a core thing about a tribe without consulting the tribe, and then that just becomes accepted culturally because natives don't necessarily, we don't have like a media outlet that is like insanely well known that can like correct people on this stuff.
Yeah, and I think that that's why it's good to have these conversations, because I'm sure there's at least some listener or viewer out there who's like, well, what's the big deal? Like, so you get something wrong, but like, yeah, if you don't have representation in the media, and then this is the only way a lot of people see what natives, quote unquote, are like in through this popular culture, then it just becomes accepted, and it's not factual, it's not right.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's like it's not factual, it's not right, and like it's a lot of what we're talking about is the end result of people not caring if they get stuff right or not with native issues. Like the fact that grown men will ask my friend if he has magic powers is like, that's like what happens when you don't care. Is like, you get these, you get kids that don't think that we exist, or they think that we died out, 100 years ago or whatever. And like that's directly due to people not caring if they got stuff right or not. And like, I mean, not to like bring it down too much, but like one of the, like, a huge killer of native people is suicide. And it's because of stuff like that. It's because we're like so invisible as a people, and like what little representation we have, it doesn't give us like hope to get out of our situations. And like, it's like you can say, oh, like, what does it matter if like somebody got a tribe name wrong or whatever? But like, people are dying over this stuff,
There's a lot of suicides and that kind of stuff.
People lose hope, and they feel maybe oppressed.
I think it's important for us to have, for our young people to have role models and to see other people going out and doing big things and coming back to the reservation and showing them that there's other things that out there, and this is what we're doing, and you can do this too,
And then, this total misunderstanding of where tribes were originally located. I want to talk about Amityville and how the myth of that house and the mythos of that book came to be, because it's so awful.
Yeah, it's such bullshit.
It sucks. So everything
can we
about
swear
it's
on this
bullshit.
podcast? It's such bullshit.
It's so
Bullshit. Oh man, fuck that guy.
Fuck that dude.
Yeah.
We actually talked about Jay Anson and the Lutzes in our like movies based on true events
that's right.
episode, and we talked about how much bullshit
It's
there
just
was.
bullshit,
It's all so much bullshit, and I didn't realize how much bullshit had to do specifically with the burial ground that I think Jay Anson wasn't claiming it. Let me look. It gets a little.
So I like reading up on it. What the deal was is that like the Lutzes or like whoever wrote the book, they hired somebody that was like a psychic medium.
Yeah,
to like go to this house, and the psychic medium said that they channeled like the spirit of like an Indian war chief.
Oh yeah,
or
ghost
something.
chief.
Yeah, like a ghost chief, and like the guy that killed his family was like possessed by this ghost chief.
So it's that guy. It's the ghost chief's fault, not the white.
Well, like that, like I don't know, guys. I could talk about this for hours.
Please do.
So like that's bullshit because like I don't know. It's like that propagates like the savage myth that like natives aren't people, that we're like animals, and like like what also sucks about that and like is that oftentimes like native issues and native representation is defined by non-natives. So this is literally like like a psychic medium who I assume is not native, just making up a bunch of bullshit, and like now people see this movie and they think, oh, got it, a crazy Indian did it, and that's like some non-native like saying like, oh, I felt their spirit or whatever.
As soon as we got out of the car, before we even entered the house, said, "There's an Indian around here." Despite the fact that the people have said it's the most haunted house in America, it is not a truly haunted house. There are no ghosts there. There are no spirits there except the Indian chief. And what he wanted, from his point of view, was get off my land.
And then too, to add to just how awful that is the I think there were conflicting ideas of why that land was haunted. So you got people saying, no, it wasn't because of this ghost chief. It was because this tribe, which didn't really even live there, put all their crazy people in this plot of land and let them die there.
Which did not. Once again, the tribe was 50 miles away from the location of this house. Also, I don't think that tribe ever did that.
No,
that's just not a thing.
There's no evidence for that. There's no evidence that there were any human remains on that site.
Yeah.
Period.
Well, and if you're part of that, if you're like part of that tribe and like you see this movie and you find out that oh, this movie's telling me or this book is telling me that like people from my tribe just took all their sick people and boarded them up in like a pen and let them die.
Yeah.
Like that makes you feel shitty, right? And that's a thing that just some non-native dude made up. Like,
yeah, and to so many people now, that's the only thing they know about your culture.
Yeah, that
like
sucks.
that total lie.
I'm not gonna lie, I was half checked out during the Amityville movie because it was so bad. But does the movie make these claims?
Yeah, the friend that comes over, who it essentially is the medium, they kind of streamline.
Oh, is like
this a
coworker
bit.
dude?
Yeah, the friend who is like, it's coming from the basement. I need to get down there. So she gets down there. And she's like, yes, this, and then she just explains that it was. They use the explanation that it was a place for.
Like they didn't quite dive into the point of like crazy war chief or whatever.
Yeah, it was more like they put sick and crazy people.
Yeah, it was like it was like that kind of thing.
So it's more prominent in the book.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the book, it's a whole thing, and it especially became a thing during the ensuing lawsuits.
And the book purported to be nonfiction. Is that what's
it's based on a true story. Like the movie's
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote based on a true story.
Peter Jordan and Rick Moran confronted Anson with their evidence that the book was not a true story, but a work of fiction.
He said, "You're one of those naysayers. You're a skeptic who likes to write non-ghost stories. I like to make money."
And I feel there were so many weird like ancillary characters in that movie that didn't really get much payoff.
Like the brother.
It's like, there was the brother. There was the there was like a sheriff or something, like an investigator.
Oh yeah, who was like trailing that.
That was
that
when
movie was a fucking
That
mess.
was when I truly stopped giving a fuck, was when that dude shows up and
And it's 2 hours long.
Well, yeah, it's like that investigator who I think you just stop seeing him at a certain point. Like the priest who like goes blind, like the nun, like I don't know. There's like so many characters where it's like, oh, they just forgot to pay that off, and the only payoff for the entire movie is after the family leaves. There's that title card at the end that says like the family chose to move to a different state.
Yeah. It's like, hey, if you've never seen the Amityville Horror, just go watch The Conjuring.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, The Conjuring is a much better.
It's a much better version of that.
And it doesn't
movie.
have an IBG. It has a witch ghost, like a Salem witch trials style ghost lady named Bathsheba. I love Bathsheba. She's scary.
I really want to know what the director conversation was in Amityville Horror when he was like, well, this movie doesn't really pay anything off. I guess we'll add a really lazy title card to the end.
Yeah.
That just says, oh, they're safe, I guess.
Poochie went back to his
Yeah,
home
Poochie's
planet.
gone back to his home planet. Yeah.
That's essentially what happened. Amityville. And then do you want to talk Pet Cemetery? Because you've read the books.
I'd
I'm
love to not
curious.
talk about Amityville. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you read the Amityville Horror book?
No. I honestly, dude, after watching that movie, I don't think horror movies are my job. I don't want to watch. There are 10 of those movies.
There's so
I don't know if you're aware. Most of them are direct to video.
Okay, so I skimmed through the Wikipedia for Amityville Horror after watching it because I was half paying attention to this. Surely I missed stuff.
Yeah.
And I think I stopped at Amityville 3D, and I was like, yeah, I get it. There were a lot of them.
Yeah.
I want nothing to do with this series.
How was the remake? There was like a remake.
Probably
in, like,
bad.
the 70s, right?
Oh yeah.
Probably bad. I fucked this property.
With, I think Ryan Reynolds is the dad.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm pretty sure he is.
Deadpool's in Amityville?
Yeah. He was in a lot of weird stuff before he was
like
Deadpool.
post Blade 3, Ryan Reynolds.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Is that Van Wilder or no?
Yeah.
Van Wilder's when I fell in love with him.
Yeah. Yeah, he's so charming.
I love him.
Yeah.
Very charming.
And now he's gonna be
Now
fucking
he's Detective Pikachu.
Yeah. He's such a good Detective Pikachu.
I'm so excited for that stupid movie. It's gonna be so good.
Yay.
Yeah, we can talk Pet Cemetery.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, anyway, guys, so the problem with Indian Burial Grounds and Detective Pikachu is that's how Gyarados was born, guys.
I'll just edit this so it's like a lapse to that. Like we just somehow naturally got to
it just
that.
dissolves into that.
Yeah. Got it. So, as a native person, which Pokemon is most offensive to me?
Jinx. It's always Jinx, no matter who you are.
Yeah, I don't know. Cubone's pretty creepy.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's cute though.
Oh yeah. So don't say any Pokemon's your spirit animal, guys.
That's the thing I think we were talking about before we started recording.
Yeah.
That's also annoying. Yeah, don't say something is your spirit animal, because that's as a native person, whenever I hear that, that's like, it's like nails on a chalkboard. And it's like, I always want to call people out when they do it, but it's just like, is today going to be the day that I like really tell this person how like racist that is?
Yeah.
And just in case someone was like, what's the problem with using spirit animal? Like, what's the problem with that? Do you have like a simple explanation for people understand? I know it gets into the whole much wider conversations, but
I guess that it's just, it's like we were saying, it's the equivalent, like to get a spirit animal is a very every tribe is different in their process, but it is a very intense personal journey. For my tribe, it involves like fasting for like a week and like sitting on like, it's like, I mean, not to go into like, anyway, natives don't have spiritual stuff, but anyway, here's all this mystical native stuff. But like, it's to get your spirit animal is a huge mark of achievement in native culture that is lessened when somebody refers to Cartman from South Park as their spirit animal. It's like, I guess, like sort of the equivalent of like if you just started carrying a purple heart around and saying that you had a purple heart. Like, it's like, it's like, it's something that it's like it's a mark of achievement that like is insulting when people just, throw it on a t-shirt and say that Cheetos is their spirit animal or whatever. Like if you're like a native person and you went through all the steps to get a spirit animal, and trust me, there are steps, and Cheetos appeared as your spirit animal, you could say that. If you're not a native person and you just like Cheetos, just say
just Cheetos.
You could just say that you like Cheetos. You don't have to culturally appropriate a thing that means a lot to a group of people to do that.
Yeah. Oh, so yeah, I wanna talk too about just why all of a sudden in horror it seemed like the IBG just kind of it felt like it came out of nowhere. And we talked a bit about Amityville, and I think most people would agree that this trope kind of starts with Amityville, and because that movie and book are huge. Like, they were huge when they came out. I know, dude. I don't get it.
People liked things that were bad back then.
Yeah, I guess so.
I mean, you know, it's probably just because of Margot Kidder and James Brolin.
I was gonna say James Brolin is super sexy in that movie until he's not. Until he's like looking like what's her face in Rosemary's Baby, when he's just all like
Rosemary.
Well, yeah, Mia Farrow. Yeah. It's like, oh, you look sick.
I read some statistic about it that like it's an indie film, and it either is the most successful indie film of all time in terms of like box office or what, or like, you know, some diametric. Also, like in researching this, I learned that the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie was also an independent film.
Wait, really?
Yeah, like I think that actually is the most successful independent film of all time because it didn't have a studio attached. They just funded it and then got distribution through whoever.
Shit.
But like Amityville Horror was, at least for a time, the most successful indie film.
I could believe that. I want to look that up later because that's really interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's in the.
I really want to see. I really hope that the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie premiered at Cannes.
Yes.
I mean,
got the golden lion.
Got the golden laurel, the Palme d'Or at like Cannes. Anyway, sorry.
I always forget that it's pronounced Cannes.
It's
not Cannes.
Cannes Film Festival. So Amityville. And what year did that come out? 70?
78,
maybe?
Yeah.
So we're
Late
getting
70s,
this, like, I think it's important that this starts happening in the 70s, and it's kind of what we were discussing with The Shining, where we get this weird latent guilt, I think, that white filmmakers are putting into their movies. And that was a theory I was reading by, again, Terri Jean, is she thinks that that's why we get these movies kind of all in a row, and why all of a sudden this trope shows up, is because when you look at the 70s as well, there's a shift in the civil rights movement for Native Americans. There's a lot of like activism and advocacy groups.
I mean, I wonder how much of this has to do with, honestly, like the hippie generation. Like, just I feel like, like late 60s, early 70s, I would say that like, certain sections of the country got a little bit more progressive, and like, it was just like, free love and et cetera. And I feel like oftentimes, Native mysticism gets like it's like looped in with like hippie stuff and like new ager stuff, which is annoying for natives. So I wonder if that has anything to do with it, unless you have research and I cut you off.
No, I could totally believe that. But yeah, if you even look at other stuff that's going on in the 70s, you even have the famous PSA of the crying Indian who is an Italian guy. It's
Iron Eyes Cody. He's 100% Sicilian.
Yes.
People start pollution. People can stop it.
Although, he's a really interesting story where like, he is an Italian guy, which is weird that like for a lot of people, the main thing that they think of when they think of natives is that guy. But he is somebody that actually, I could be remembering this incorrectly, but I think that he did get very into the culture and he was actually accepted into a tribe.
That's amazing.
That's kind of awesome.
Like I could be misremembering that, but I think I've heard that from a couple of sources of like, he is a guy that like, he kind of understood that it was fucked up a little bit.
Yeah.
And like he put the work in and like, he cared. He gave a shit.
Yeah. That's awesome. I did not know that.
But it still is dumb that like that like a PSA that like was probably maybe funded by the government or like some organization thought that it would be smart to hire a Sicilian guy to be a native guy, know.
Yeah, I'm always wondering what the thinking is behind that. As opposed to why not just hire a native person?
I mean, oh man, this is another conversation I could talk about for a while. I think that oftentimes people, I mean, specifically back then, they were just like, oh, he fits the stereotype of what we think a native person looks like. Got it. Nowadays, a lot of it is, my friend Lucas refers to it as the pipeline, in that like, there are a lot of very talented native actors and writers, but there aren't necessarily a lot of talented native actors and writers that Hollywood execs know about. So like oftentimes when movies are cast and like things like PSAs are cast by, they'll do auditions, but it's also like people have people that they know and people they reach out to. And like, that's when you get things like Taylor Lautner being cast as like a native in the Twilight series. Taylor Lautner, I think has like a very small amount of like, native blood in him, biological blood quotient or whatever. But like it was something that he definitely conveniently discovered after he got the part.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like literally like his grandmother was like, oh yeah, I think one of our relatives is Indian.
Oh man, every white family has done that.
Yeah, and like that sucks. Don't do that. Like I don't know. Like so if you're an executive and you're like, oh, I really want to cast like a native person to be a part of this tribe in this Twilight movie. I don't know any native actors, but Taylor Lautner, who I do know and who's got credits, says that he's native. So I think I feel okay casting him in that part when you don't realize that like his native, representation, his native, like the amount that he is native has been very overblown. And also like being native isn't just like a blood quotient thing. It's not like 1/16th. It's not 1/32nd. Part of it, a big part of it is also like how involved are you in the culture? Like, so questions that I commonly ask like other natives when I talk to them, when I meet another native is like, what's your tribe? Where's your reservation? What's your Aboriginal land? And just the process of kind of like sussing out how legit they are or not. So it's like, if you get a 23andMe that says that you're like, 1/100th whatever, like, don't immediately start trying to take up opportunities for natives.
Yeah.
Like that's not the same as somebody that like grew up on a reservation and like, like has gone through all of the, like all of the ceremonies and all the things and is like, aware of their culture and cares about their culture and all that stuff,
Yeah, and who's had to live with the impact of stuff. Like, again, the cultural events that were, I think, impacting these movies coming out in like the 70s, early 80s, where you've got the, I think one of the most interesting just like historical events period is the occupation of Alcatraz in 1969, which I think had a big influence on this type of white guilt-ish screenwriting and the idea of land ownership being really fraught with tension in America because Alcatraz, if you don't know about this, it's the most fascinating
I
story.
visited Alcatraz last year, and like that was my first time learning about this, and I was like, oh, that's fucking awesome.
It's so crazy that,
Like I didn't learn about this until fairly recently, and I think it's great.
Yes.
I was like,
it's
whoa.
amazing. They're actually, I'll plug another podcast because they have a very good episode about it. It's The Dollop. They did a really good, like they get so much more in depth into the research than we can right now. Basically, so the Treaty of Fort Laramie, 1868, between the Lakota and the United States specified that all federal land that was out of use was to be returned to the native people who once lived there. 1868. So in 1963, Alcatraz closes and it was declared surplus federal property. So it just wasn't being used. It was just sitting there.
Like it's for tours or whatever.
Yeah. And so there's this treaty that presumably is still in effect. And so activists think, well, this qualifies as land that's due to be reclaimed, which it did. It 100% legally qualified.
100%. They should have gotten that land back.
Yeah. So Alcatraz was occupied. The island itself was occupied by at most 400 people for 19 months. That's so long.
Nice.
Yes. It's incredible. And
that's not a fun place to be. There's a reason it was a prison there.
Did, yeah. And the Dollop episode gets more into this, but just the politics of being on that island, and of course, like, throughout the protest as it goes and gets more national attention, you got a bunch of just like white hippies show up and kind of ruin the party.
Oh, yeah. It's like white people that are like, I can be involved too.
Exactly. And then the meaning of it is weird and no one knows why they're there anymore.
Well, there's also weird stuff about like, it's like white saviorism is common in native country. Very recent example is like the Standing Rock protests. The Standing Rock protests were very important. A lot of natives really worked for it, and a lot of non-natives really helped with that role. But there were also
was that for the pipeline?
Yeah, Standing Rock. Yeah, that was the Dakota Access Pipeline. But there were also a lot of non-natives that showed up to Standing Rock with like a pallet of water, and they expected to be greeted like heroes. And it's like, oh, we appreciate that you're helping, but like that's not. I mean, like we're not. Like every person that comes in with like a $50 donation, we're not going to give them like a tribal name.
Right.
Like,
Not going to do the Daenerys, like everyone lifting you up and carrying you around like the hero.
Like, and I think that there were a lot of like, I guess, like New Ager types, like, hippy dippy people that like saw this and they were like, oh, cool. I can help and feel like my white spirit is free.
Yeah.
And then like, they're not carried around enchanted because this is a real protest that people are doing. And like,
it's not about you.
Yeah. People like try to make it about them, which sucks.
And that's what kind of happened on Alcatraz. And you get people coming in like that. And then you have the egos involved of, well, who's leading it? And so after this happens, the American Indian movement was targeted by the FBI.
Yeah.
And
Cool.
the Richard Oakes who led the protest was shot by a white supremacist and killed. So it's cool.
Wow, cool. Yeah, there's
really fun American history.
This episode, I'm sure, has been a real uplifting episode.
You know what?
A barrel of laughs.
My favorite is when people come from like James's kill counts, which are all very fun and stuff, to the podcast where I'm like, you're gonna get learned. Like we're gonna teach you.
But like the history of Native Americans as compared to U.S. colonial history is littered with broken treaties.
Yeah.
Like there's literally like right now, like I forget the tribe's name, but the tribe that like met with the Pilgrims at Plymouth Rock, like President Trump is working right now to strip them of a lot of their Aboriginal land. And this is like,
what the fuck?
And this is the tribe that like, if they wouldn't have helped those pilgrims, America probably wouldn't be a country. Like,
yeah, that's like literally not apocryphal either. You think maybe that Thanksgiving story is an apocryphal weird thing, but that happened. Those people all would have died.
Yeah.
And then we went and just murdered them.
Yeah.
All. Like,
I think about how like with for instance, I guess we'll go political a little bit, but like Trump pulling out the Iran nuclear deal and nuclear treaty, a lot of the conversation around that was like, well, the worst part about doing this is that in the future, other countries won't be able to trust the U.S.'s word when it comes to agreements and deals. And I like when I read that, I was like, yeah, that's kind of probably how the native people feel.
Our thing.
And have always felt.
I mean, just like personal story, my tribe, we ran into this thing where like we didn't get reservation land when we signed a treaty with the U.S. government in like the 1850s or something like that. We made a deal with the U.S. government where we were going to receive, X amount of dollars for every square mile of land or whatever. Around this time, a lot of my people died out. There originally were, I think, I want to say 8,000 or something like that over the span of 10 years, it shrank to around 400. And that's through I'm sure European diseases, also like wars with people like the Hudson Bay Company and things like that. So the U.S. government saw this low number of natives in our tribe that they could, kind of register and pinpoint. And they said, oh, we don't have to pay you for the treaty that we signed because there aren't enough of you for us to consider you as a federally recognized tribe. So they stripped away our tribal recognition in the 1850s or whatever. And then for 150 years, the people of my tribe gathered up, took notes, took very intricate track of genealogy and things like that. And it wasn't until literally the year 2000 that we had roll numbers that were big enough for us to be able to show the U.S. government, for them to say, fine, we'll say you're a tribe again. And then they gave us that money back. That was a 150-year battle that directly affected me as a person. And and for me, those that affects me in that the U.S. government, they made a deal where they weren't we're not just going to give $50 million to these random natives. What we will do is we'll put this money into a savings account and we'll give you guys the interest or whatever. So the interest payments from this payment that was owed to us 150 years ago directly helped pay for me to go to college.
Oh.
So it's there is just, I don't know, it's native history is insane.
Yeah. And that's why the next thing in my notes is another big thing culturally that was going on at this time is the Trail of Broken Treaties. Aptly named 1972. It was a giant cross-country protest. This I'd never heard of either, but it's so crazy. It was a giant, basically just a big group road trip, big caravan across the country to the capital. And to date, it was the largest meeting ever of American Indians with the government, the largest group all at once going to meet at the Capitol to talk to the government to that date. And Nixon said, "No, I'm good." Oh.
But wasn't it like Nixon said, "Nah, I'm good," but then like there were so many protesters
Yes.
that like finally
they
were like,
started to like fuck shit up, and they
they were like, "Okay, fine, we'll talk to you after we killed millions of your people."
Yeah. It unfortunately, it had to get to the point where protesters are like, all right, we're going to start vandalizing shit. And that worked. And it sucks that it had to get to that point. But sometimes you got to, like, when you look at what's at stake for these people who have up to that point very peacefully protested across literally the entire country.
Well, that is something that is very, I guess, genuinely scary for me as like a Native person, is like, so many of our treaties have been broken that there is a feeling of what's next. Mm-hmm. So like, at any point, like this money that we were given by the U.S. government, like that is directly helping a lot of natives from my tribe. It's allowing us to build like elder housing for elders. We recently got what's called trust land, where you basically like you buy land on your Aboriginal territory. And then even if it wasn't like officially given to you as a reservation, you can kind of sign it into trust land and have it become kind of like for legal purposes a reservation. Like that's the thing that my tribe recently got. And that's I think that was another like 100-year process to do. But that land we used to build like a casino and stuff like that. And that casino, the funds from that casino are directly helping the people from my tribe with like all sorts of things. Like I said, like things like elder housing, things like building a museum to like preserve our culture. And my concern is that, like, seeing treaties get broken, like this tribe on the East Coast, like, at what point is the government just going to say, like, oh, yeah, never mind about that trust land thing? Or, like, at what point are they just going to take something, like, away from us that's been given to us? Because, like, they've done it before,
Yeah.
Yeah. And, it's like what you said, of just setting that standard of, well, no one can trust us now. It's like, well.
Yeah. Well, that's, like, I mean, and to take it back to, like, what we're talking about with, like, the IBGs, not IBSs.
IBS, yeah.
I'm going to keep on saying IBSs because I think it's funny. Those IBSs is like people don't know about these insane things that like these real things that are happening with like Native people that like natives are really terrified of. And like there is like a great distrust for a lot of natives with like, the government and things like that. And like the fact that we don't have media representation to like show us in the media in an accurate light, I think helps fuel those feelings,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it is important to kind of point this out in a genre we love very much, and horror is the genre that tends to get the most political. Horror is politics. If you have been watching the new Eli Roth series.
Oh yeah.
Actually, it's really, really good.
I need to watch it. I hear it's good.
Yeah,
History
it's great.
of Horror. It's great.
They get a lot into how the politics of certain eras really influence the horror that's coming out at the time, and how horror tends to be ahead of the game in terms of representation and stuff. So it's a shame to kind of look at an area and a trope and looking at how it's not great in representation that way. And I think there is such room in horror to tell these stories in a way that's really effective. And
well, I didn't know this, and I'm assuming your notes aren't lying, so this is a fun fact. The remake of Pet Sematary doesn't have
because we were
IBG?
talking about, because you were saying you watched the trailer, and we were kind of talking on Facebook about the new movie, and I think that's just not in it anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's watching the trailer. I could be wrong, but it seems like they're steering away from the Indian burial ground trope in the sequel or in the remake.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. The cause of it is spooky kids wearing masks.
Sure,
like
playing
it's not,
drums.
Yeah. And I hope that that's the case. I hope that they're not like, just kidding. It's spooky natives.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that is just, I think that like I've painted sort of like, I guess, a dark picture of Native representation and the state of Native country and stuff like that. But I do think things are getting better.
Yeah.
I think that people are becoming more aware that things like the Indian burial ground trope is a shitty thing to do, and it is a shitty thing to put on an entire subgroup of people.
Mm-hmm.
And things like doing a remake of a film where that was a big part of it, and removing that for the remake, to me, like, that feels good. I appreciate that. It's like, they're doing the bare minimum to make me not feel angry when watching a horror movie that I want to see.
Yeah, and it's like, again, and we're not saying people who've made these movies are bad people or that these
I am.
movies
They're all real bad people. Oh, man.
Well,
Stephen
actually,
King, you were a bad
Stephen
person.
King,
Stephen King, The Shining and Pet Sematary, you did this twice.
Actually, interestingly, Kubrick is responsible for the inclusion of that in The Shining. That's not in the book.
Kubrick's all right. Kubrick's good.
You crazy. You're fine. Actually, in
I
college,
was gonna say, even if it was in the book for Stephen King, the percentage just based on the books alone that he's written is probably like
like 1% of his books.
Yeah, it's like it seems like it is when we talked about it at the top of the show, like it is such an easy lay on of like, oh, this is like a haunted amusement park. Why is it haunted? Like, you know, it allows you. I understand as a writer, like the want to be lazy, and it's like, oh yeah, this gives me a justification for why there are demons here or whatever. And like, I just ask that if you do that, don't make it directly related to misrepresenting my entire people.
And like, I'll be straight up. In college, I wrote a short, IBG.
How dare you?
I did it. I needed a reason for something specific to be happening. And I was like, oh, this works for what I need. And I did it. And I don't think I'm a bad person. But that's something where I look back and recognize like that was lazy writing.
That's it. This podcast is
we're
over.
done.
Yeah, well, and also, yeah, I mean, that's people do dumb stuff when they're young.
Yeah, and it's fine to fuck up, but we also need to look at why that's not a cool thing to do. And again, we can do that with movies we really like. I actually think it's almost more helpful to do it with something like The Shining, where it's clearly a movie we all like.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
Yeah. But I think it's helpful to kind of like do it with that.
Like, I don't even mind the extreme emotional abuse of the lead actress.
Poor Shelley Duvall.
Yeah, God, that's man. Stanley Kubrick's a fucking monster.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Just like Hitchcock,
fucking monster who directs like an angel.
Auteurs, baby. I'm glad we did this right after Thanksgiving. This is like a good like end of November episode, I think.
It's always when people want to talk about native stuff.
Oh, dude,
right around
I'm sure.
Thanksgiving.
I was like, dude, I bet I'm not the only person being like, hey, Joey, what's up?
Oh, it's okay. I mean, I don't know. It's better that that we. Ideally, you should talk to natives all year round.
Yeah, right.
But like, you know, it's better now than never.
Yeah. I know. I want to have you back on to do like if we ever talk about like horror movies with like scary
Cats in
animals.
them?
Yeah, like literally horror movies about scary animals and cats specifically. Come back for that.
Pet
please.
Cemetery again.
Actually,
God damn it.
when I do want to say we've like really talked a lot of shit on Pet Cemetery. But like my favorite actor in the movie was Church the Cat. That cat was real spooky.
It was a real good
also
cat.
very cute. It was just a good cat.
Good
I hope
cat
that cat lived a very long and happy life.
Isn't that the movie where it lays next to the little girl and gets covered up in a blanket?
Oh
and,
my
like,
God,
is there?
yes.
She like goes to bed with the little girl.
Yeah,
it's so cute.
like stuff like that where it's like, oh, that's a real love.
I remember
cat.
we both just like verbally, we were just like, oh, when that
Like,
happened.
Lucy, why would you do
Lucy
this?
would never
Like,
get on
I
a
hope
blanket.
that cat got like so many good pets for being in that movie.
Yeah.
Well, you're a busy guy, and I
Yeah.
know that you've got lots of fun stuff to promote.
Oh, thank you.
Oh,
Thank
yeah.
you. Oh, yeah.
You
Thank you for looking at my.
I talked about I want to like look at you brought your zine and I'm just
Okay,
really
great.
excited.
Yeah, actually,
But
you guys can look at it while I'm promoting.
Yeah.
Feel free. First off, I want to promote my satire book. It's called The American Indian Ready to Wear Catalog 2018. It's a 10-page comedy magazine about all the weird ways Native Americans are represented in media in the form of a fashion catalog. It was illustrated by Janet Meyer, who's a fellow Cowlitz artist, and she's also my mom. How cute is that, guys?
Oh, your mom did this.
Yeah, my mom.
So
Yeah. My mom's
cool.
been an artist for she's been an artist since she was like 12.
Oh my god!
Like it's like she paints murals and stuff like that for like it's like how she makes her money. So you can buy a physical and digital copies of the book at redcatpress.com, and it's like $1 for a digital copy, $5 for a physical copy. If you can't afford the $1 to buy a digital copy of this book, send me a tweet at JoeyTainment, and I will send you a free PDF of it.
Awesome.
And then I also want to promote this Saturday. Wait, when is this?
Or
episode?
actually, no, hit me up, and he won't send you a free one. Hit me up, and I'll buy one for you. A PDF.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Just email deadmeatjames@gmail.com. Seriously, if you want one of these, this is hilarious.
Oh, thanks. Yeah,
for sure.
Wait, when is this episode going up?
This goes up Tuesday, this upcoming Tuesday.
Oh, okay. Sweet. So I can promote this thing. Okay, great. So this Saturday, a short animated film I wrote and directed is screening at the Los Angeles Animation Festival.
Is that December 1st?
Yeah, it's December 1st at 4 p.m. at the Mayflower Club in North Hollywood. You can buy tickets for it at laafest.com. My short film is definitely on topic of what we're talking about. It's called Telling People You're Native American When You're Not Native is a lot like telling a bear you're a bear when you're not a bear. And it's about what you'd think it would be about. I'll let you guys watch it after we're done recording. You guys, specifically of you two and not listeners, you have to go to the thing to watch it. But yeah, you should check it out. I'm real proud of it. And it's about all these fun native microaggressions we were talking about. And you can also follow me on Twitter at JoeyTainment. I don't know. I'm a funny guy.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, honestly, like we've been talking about like, native stuff this whole thing, but also Joey's one of the funniest people I've ever you're like Andy Kaufman.
Yeah.
You're like a modern goddamn day.
If you like
Andy
Nathan
Kaufman.
Fielder, I feel like
these are all good.
Yeah.
All
I
good
feel like you're
compliments.
all in the same little weird family.
Yeah,
I mean, you shaved your beard and sent it to Ted Cruz.
Yeah, oh man, guys, I do so many bits.
I know, and I love
that
them.
was the best bit.
One of the
such a joy.
Like one of the best compliments I ever got. I host a podcast called 25 Minutes of Silence, where the premise is that a guest and I just sit in silence for 25 minutes. And I came up with the idea, like kind of not thinking about like Andy Kaufman stuff. Andy Kaufman, like I'm compared to him a lot, but I don't necessarily I'm not a huge fan of his.
Okay.
But like his like main co-writer Bob Zamuda actually heard of my podcast, and his assistant sent me an email saying, Bob Zamuda thinks your podcast is very funny.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Hell yes.
But I don't know. So I do a lot of bullshit, guys. Check me out.
It's hilarious.
I love that podcast premise so much because you really do. If you want to be a guest on that, you have to sit there with Joey for 25 minutes, just being quiet.
Yeah, there's no faking it.
Yeah.
Like I've had I had like Ken Bone on the show. I had a former astronaut.
That's right, Ken Bone.
I had a former astronaut. While Ken Bone was on the show, he was replying to fan mail, which he still gets.
Yes.
Let's see. Former astronauts. In 2016, I tried to get a former a presidential candidate on the podcast, and I ended up getting Zoltan Istvan, who's a transhumanist candidate. But I asked this guy that's like I don't want to put him on blast, name his name, but I asked like one of the higher up like third party candidates to be on the podcast. And I had a phone conversation with him where he said, I'll do your podcast, but I'm not going to sit in silence with you for 25 minutes. I will only do the intro where you introduce me and the outro where I plug my campaign. And I told him no deal.
Yeah. I think you told us
That's
who this
integrity.
was, but I'm going to confirm after the
Yeah, I don't know. If I told it on the Zombeaver
I don't think you
episode,
did.
You didn't. It was while we were just hanging out before.
Yeah, I don't know. It's whoever you think. You can guess.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that's all my bullshit.
So good.
Yeah, what do you guys want to promote?
Keep watching us.
Yeah, keep watching the thing. Twitter stuff, I guess.
Oh yeah, at Dead Meat James on Twitter and Instagram.
I'm Carebeck, CareBecc on Twitter and Instagram, and we have merch, demistore.com.
Yeah, buy that merch.
Yeah, we also have the second season of D&D starting, which is our Dungeons and Dragons podcast that we thankfully are just performers on. We don't have to edit or write anything, which is a nice change of pace. But that's run by James Gressel, and with help by Joel Arnold, who you probably know as the other Practical Folks. And Beth B. Rad, who designed my logo, and Mike Seigan, they're in it too. It's great. It's good fun. Just look up DNDND.
Yeah, not ampersand.
Nope.
Letter N.
Because of legal stuff.
Because of legal things.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess that's about it. Joey, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was super fun.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun.
We talked about a lot of really lighthearted stuff, guys. Just like laugh a minute. I mean, you said I was funny up top, and I think I delivered.
Yep. We'll be back with a movie review next week, but until then, I'm James.
I'm Chelsea.
And that's Joey.
Hi, everybody.
And this has been the Dead Meat Podcast.
Bye. Pew, pew.